Establish quorum to my far left, Council President Clark, just in case we needed it. Yes, we're good. Councilwoman Sherelle Parker, Councilman Heenan, and to my right, Councilwoman Janie Blackwell. Will the clerk read the title of the bills?
Bill number 170957, an ordinance authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2017 from the general fund from certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the water fund from certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund, certain or all city offices, department, boards, and commissions, the aviation fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, to the general fund, to certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the water fund to certain or all city offices, department, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund to certain or all offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund to certain or all city offices, department, boards, and commissions. Bill number 170958, an ordinance authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2018 from the general fund, certain or all offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund, certain or all offices, departments, boards, and commissions, to the general fund, certain or all city offices, department, boards, and commissions, the water fund, certain or all offices, department, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund, certain or all offices, boards, and commissions.
Thank you. The chair recognizes that Councilman O has joined us. We're going to ask Anna Adams to come forward. Oh, Councilman Brian O'Neill also joins us. In the council packets, you will see the appropriations. We're going to start with 957. There is a memo provided by our budget director, Anna Adams, to specific questions that committee members have. Those questions may be asked publicly to be put on the record. So, Anna, if you want to start. All of the different departments are here. There's a list of all the witnesses that are here. Any of my council colleagues, please feel free to let me know any of those folks if you have a specific question. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Canona Sanchez and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Anna Adams. Joining me at the table is Sarah DeWolf, also from my office, and I'm the Budget Director for the City of Philadelphia. I appear before you today to offer testimony on Bill number 170957, which provides for a transfer within the General Fund, the Water Fund, and the Grants Revenue Fund. The ordinance will provide transfer appropriations to expenditure classes where shortages have occurred and or additional resources were deemed necessary, as follows: $671,861 to the police department, partially offset by an internal transfer of $104,465. $1.5 million to the streets department to fully fund payroll costs, fully offset by an internal department transfer of $1.5 million. $315,847 to the fire department for payroll costs, which is also partially offset by an internal transfer of $211,413. $5 million to the health department for health center facilities. $137,166 for the prisons department to fund payroll, fully offset by an internal transfer of $137,166. $127,221 to the Commerce Department, which is also fully offset by an internal transfer of $127,221. $10,602 to the Civil Service Commission to fully fund payroll, fully offset by an internal transfer of $10,602. $796,269 for the Office of Property Assessment, which is also fully offset by an internal transfer. $65,242 to the Board of Revision of Taxes for payroll charges. This is partially offset by an internal transfer of $9,187. $176,999 to the Register of Wills, which is partially offset by $35,095. $4.1 million to the sheriff to fully fund payroll costs, which is partially offset by an internal transfer of $29,202. $304,632 to the city commissioners. $2.1 million to the First Judicial District to appropriate funds per the zero growth agreement between the FJD and the city. In the Water Fund, $5 million to the Director of Finance It's composed of $500,000 to fund higher than anticipated indemnity charges and $4.6 million to fund the transfer of fringe benefit charges from the Water Capital Fund to the Water Operating Fund, which is fully offset by an internal transfer of $5 million. In the Aviation Fund, $450,371 to the Fire Department for payroll costs, and in Grants Revenue Fund, $500,000 to the Law Department for an unanticipated grants for legal services in support of the Philadelphia beverage tax. I respectfully request that you report this bill out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and I further request that the rules of council be suspended so as to permit first reading at the next session of council. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before this committee today and would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Additionally, representatives from the departments involved with the transfers are available as well. In the packet, you should also have every department's testimony.
Yes, again, we have them.
Great.
We do have your memo with the response to the questions. There is an amendment, oh, that's for the next one.
For the
So
next
I'll leave it for the next one. Okay. A couple of questions. Can you quickly explain the zero growth agreement between judicial and the city?
Actually, I think I'd prefer to refer to the First Judicial District, and I think there are representatives from them here who can talk a little bit more detail than I can about it, and they can give the history behind it.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. My name is Kevin Cross, Deputy Court Administrator for the First Judicial District. Zero growth agreement dates back to the 90s and the Rendell administration, and is a agreement that allows the court to reallocate its savings based on the fact that the court does not seek any additional funding in its budget. So we have a zero growth agreement where we don't seek any additional funds in our budget, and if we generate any savings within our budget, we can realign those funds to support technology and infrastructure and facilities management.
So in the $2.1 million, can you talk to us about where that's going?
That will be going into our Class 100 budget. We'll be using it to fund technology advances in the Criminal Justice Center. Last year, we used it for cameras and Wi-Fi internet in the Criminal Justice Center, and we're looking to create projects to allocate those funds in for this fiscal year.
So Wi-Fi, you said?
Yes, we used it for Wi-Fi and cameras in the Justice Center. That was it.
But you're saying it's going in Class 100, so Class 100 is personnel.
Yes, the funds the savings were generated in Class 100, and through this ordinance, we'll be transferring them to Class 200.
So how does this compare to previous years about how much money you're reallocating within your budget?
This year, we're reallocating about $2 million. In previous years, it's been about $5 or $6 million, so substantially lower.
So this year is substantially lower?
That's
But
correct.
those are big numbers.
Yes, they are.
And how long has this agreement been in place?
It's been in effect since the 90s, since the Rendell administration.
I think it's time for us to revisit that agreement. We're going to have a tough budget cycle moving forward. And I think there is a commitment by this administration and council around criminal justice reforms that some of those savings, what we consider efficient budgeting,
Well, there's some of the
victim of your own success, but
Some of the savings we have positions that we have to keep open and carry them over from year to year, and if they remain unfilled, we have to maintain those positions, like for our judicial staff and for other functions.
so it's been a historical trend that you over budget in positions, and then that's the money are you legally binded to have those positions?
Absolutely, yes. We're legally binded to fund our judicial staff.
And then when you don't use the money, then you reallocate it?
It gets carried over, because we get judicial vacancies during the course of the year, yes.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is concerning the police department. I'm not sure if there's someone from the police department who's here who can join you. Okay, thank you. Obviously, we see in the testimony here, Anna, where you note that the request for the $671,861 for Class 100 personnel services to, as you state, fund increased overtime. We know that you referenced that this increase in overtime has been because of the overwhelming amount of demonstrations and exhibitions that we've seen increased as many social and economic justice issues have found their way to the forefront of our sort of social action agenda. I'm talking about now amongst Philadelphia residents. And we always want to ensure that our police department is on the front line to ensure that there are peaceful demonstrations and that Philadelphia sort of lives up to his ownness as the birthplace of democracy. I have to state for the record that there is a challenge, though, from the public's perspective. When those who are home, who are not here, they hear about almost $700,000 in overtime for us to patrol demonstrations and exhibitions. Again, we want to make sure we're promoting public safety, but they think about their neighborhoods and the need for the increase of bike patrols on commercial corridors, just traditional beat cops in the neighborhood. And we know that each of our captains, like most department heads, are struggling to make do with very limited funds. I would like for you, if you will, to sort of talk about that challenge. This request here for almost $700,000 for that overtime, but I'm thinking about my folks in the 2nd. I'm thinking about my 35th. I'm thinking about the 14th, and how do I go back and tell that constituency there's been overtime, but not enough to fund the additional supports that you need, and just talk about it from a management perspective.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Councilwoman Sanchez. Thanks for having us here today. The issue with regarding the overtime is very much... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Deputy Commissioner Christine Coulter, Philadelphia Police. The issues that we have that require this overtime is directly related to the services that we provide in the districts. If we were to police all these events with straight-time officers, there would be nobody patrolling any of the places that you just talked about, as well as the other 18 police districts that we're servicing. A lot of the protests, while people are exercising their rights, don't coordinate it with the police schedule or when we have staffing. So we have to be prepared to protect everybody's rights, including those protesters, to make sure that they don't get hurt in the process, that police officers don't get hurt, and that regular citizens can go about doing their business at the same time. And it's really a delicate balance. And at the end of the day, we want and would love to be able to keep our cops in the neighborhoods all the time, but with our current staffing, there's no way we could complete both of those tasks without utilizing overtime and without stripping those districts that we're so committed to serving. So it really is a challenge. We would love to be able to find that balance just using our regular funds, but that would have necessitated leaving some districts dangerously understaffed in order to just have straight-time officers policing these events based on the time and frequency that they occur.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, and I want to say to you, one, I appreciate your response. We appreciate law enforcement's work on the front lines of protecting and serving our neighborhoods, but I appreciate your response on the record, because taxpayers in neighborhoods, when they see this activity and they question those of us, particularly those of us who are district council members, the at-large people, they get some of it too, but for those of us responsible for a district, they're saying, okay, this overtime, but the 2nd Police District, they need a new building. And the captain, they begin to attempt to give you the response that, listen, we all have to, this is a sort of shared sacrifice, but how do you justify that to the constituents? So you gave a response on the record. I want you to know we respect it. We appreciate what you do, but when the police department comes before us during our next budget cycle, my question is going to be around balancing, that delicate balance that you referenced in your response between the increase in patrols in neighborhoods versus what we do when we have an uptick in major demonstrations like we've seen within the last year and a half. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Johnson, who's also joined the panel.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow up on some of the comments that my colleague, Councilwoman Parker, just mentioned regarding the overtime in the Philadelphia Police Department and making sure we have equal distribution of police resources all throughout the city of Philadelphia. Have we ever thought about particularly revamping how we assign or non-assign officers to events that are special events that are taking place throughout the city of Philadelphia? And a classic example is I represent the stadium district, right? Yes. And for the most part, every time there's a football game, baseball game, basketball game, or any concert or venue, you have police officers who pretty much monitor and patrol the area of Packer Park, South Philadelphia. When you go to New York City, right, they have a civilian patrol officers who actually go out and monitor these events, direct traffic. Have we ever thought about using that type of model that could pretty much save a significant amount of funding and allow other officers to engage in beat patrol, engage in more bicycle patrol officers that we can distribute throughout the city of Philadelphia?
I'm not really familiar with what New York does, but we would probably run into some labor issues there if we use civilians that were taking jobs that historically have been held by police. The inside the stadium uses a lot of private security and private personnel, but when it comes to directing traffic and some of those responsibilities that our citizens and our people who are going to those events tend to rely on too, you want people who you know are trained and can also perform first aid and any of those other things. So it would again be a balance to say, what is the scope of the work that those other folks are doing? We don't currently have private patrol in the area of the stadium, yet the stadium hires other security people other than police. It's not entirely policed by the Philadelphia Police Department. They contract with a second service that takes care of most of the inside positions. But when it comes to traffic and pedestrian patrol, that's historically done by uniformed police officers.
So what type of labor issues would you run into if we decided to not so much privatize? It could be a civilian government, quasi-government agency that would engage in this, because all you're doing is directing traffic. That's pretty much what happens when you go to a game. That's pretty much it. And the inside, really, where the rough stuff happens, if you go to an Eagles game, to be quite frank with you probably meet more real officers there to kind of stop somebody from assaulting one another during a game. But outside, other than that, it's just pretty much blocking traffic, directing traffic and so forth. So you're saying because it has traditionally been
and
police officers?
There are agreements with our professional sports teams that police would do that, so that would be something that would have to be revisited.
I wanted to be clear on that part.
And I agree with you that the inside of the stadium could be problems. Quite often, so are the parking lots, because we have a lot of tailgaters that come early, so there's challenges there as well.
Okay. All right.
I just want to state for the record, I think there was a hearing when I first got here, and I look around, I'm a senior member over here, except for Councilman O'Neill and Blackwell. There was some discussions around what a civilian police force would look like under the previous administration. Kind of never went anywhere. So I encourage you, I know Councilman Jones and you are very active around public safety, maybe engaging in that conversation again about what does a police civilian force look like and how is it associated with the FOP and our existing situation, particularly as you look at traffic duty and all the other things around. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you,
Who's
Madam
also
Chairman.
joined the panel, for the record.
Thank you. And good afternoon. I have several questions I wanted to ask.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to make sure from the DNC convention, I noticed in the police report, there's still some overtime that was paid. Have we been reimbursed 100%, or how much did the DNC actually cost us at the end of the day?
The DNC is still under audit, so we're fairly confident that we will be reimbursed because we have the records that show everything. We got, was it 13 million? About 12 million was already put back into our funds.
How much are we short?
With DNC-related overtime, we're not short at all. Now, they could ask for some of that back if in the course of the audit, they don't find that we've met their burden based on the federal grant. But we could not charge the DNC for the extra coverage we had to have in districts by pulling cops out because it wasn't related to the grant.
So is it safe to say then citywide, all DNC costs were reimbursed 100%?
No.
I can't speak for the city. I can only speak for the police costs.
Do we know how much the convention actually cost us?
I do not know.
Yeah,
I mean, so we had some agreement with the Department of Justice, and so I think that's what the Commissioner is kind of referring to, kind of there's some overtime and the other charges that we have with the Department of Justice, and there's an audit going on with the Department of Justice to make sure that all of our paperwork is accurate, and everything, we anticipate that we will receive everything that we have billed the DOJ for. The tough things are things like the Deputy Commissioner just mentioned, the things that are kind of ancillary to that there are other overtime costs that cannot be billed to anybody because it's actually just kind of covering the gap elsewhere in the city. So we know that there are other expenses that came about with the DNC that
So the reason why I'm asking the question is because I remember sitting in a meeting before the DNC happened, and I asked the question, and I was told we should be reimbursed about 100%, except for maybe a few $100,000 of expenses. And so what I'd like to see us produce for this committee maybe, or finance, whichever, a kind of
a list.
Yeah, a list of the expenses and a list of reimbursements.
Okay.
So we can see the full picture.
We can do that.
Okay.
Just for the record, in your packet, we did ask the police department, and they itemized all of the different overtime costs associated by different line items. So you could review that, and anything in addition that you want to that, we'd be happy to have them forwarded over to the chair.
Yeah, I'm interested in the full picture of the whole DNC. The other question I have is on the streets department.
So that's a question for the budget director, to have all DNC actual expenditures, what's reimbursed, and what was the city's investment. That's different than just the police.
Yeah.
Okay.
Budget director.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the streets department, I think it was,
We're finished with the police department? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
I can direct these to you, Anna. You wrote back that the streets department budget was higher because of, we're purchasing more compactors. But like a year and a half ago, or last year, fiscal year 17, we allocated $8 million, because we heard the same thing, that we needed to buy more compactors for overtime. Did that happen?
We have been buying more compactors, and we continue to buy more compactors. Some of it's timing of when it takes a while once you've actually put the bid in for them to actually be on the street, and so there's a timing issue. But we continue to buy compactors. It's something that we're really conscious of. You'll see it in the capital budget again this year. We will continue to buy compactors to try and mitigate on this unnecessary overtime, because we agree with you. We're trying to do what we can to increase kind of our
So for the record, can we say that next year at this time, we're not going to hear there's more overtime because we don't have enough compactors?
I mean, the challenge we always have, because some of our vehicles are so old, sometimes they end up having to be relinquished before we realize they're going to be relinquished. So we're still kind of playing a bit of catch up. And so we need to get that balance right. And it's not just with streets department vehicles, it's with other large vehicles, honestly, that we are still trying to make sure we're making the right investment. We could probably spend, tens and tens of millions of dollars on updating our fleet throughout the city that would have, a lot of impact. We're trying to do it we're looking at the oldest vehicles. Fleet department is doing their analysis to make sure that we're getting the right number of vehicles. We hope we're getting there, but it's taking us some time. And I hope this time next year you'll see a big difference, but we may not have fully solved the problem because we just don't know when some of these vehicles break down.
You're leaving the door open.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the water department for a minute. In your notes that you sent us, it said the water capital payroll was $34 million. And you said with actual expenditures of $27.6 million.
Yes.
And that funded 307 positions? Is that including fringe benefit costs in that number?
So what we're trying to do with fringe benefits, we are trying now, actually we aren't, kind of moving forward, funding any fringe benefits out of the capital budget, and that's part of the change that you see in these transfer ordinances. We feel like we're trying to gradually move away from funding payroll altogether, which is a bit of an expensive thing to do, but in the capital budget, we'd like to start sort of paying for payroll on the operating budget rather than having to borrow to pay for fund payroll. So in the short term, what we're looking at is to remove all fringe benefits from the costs related to in the capital budget. And so they will now be borne on the operating side. And then you'll see that kind of going along, that kind of will be shrinking the amount of kind of the payroll costs altogether on the capital side. So maybe as we're hiring, instead of hiring on the capital budget, we'll be hiring them more on the operating budget. And you'll start seeing that change over the next few years. It's something that we'll have to do gradually because it's quite expensive to do it all in one go. So we'll be doing that as we go along.
I mean, but the 307 positions at the water department, it comes out to $91,400 per position.
So that does include fringe benefits in that number. That's why it's...
That's why?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's not a good accounting practice. How long has that been happening where you're using capital fund money for operating?
I don't know. I mean, this is why, I mean, since I've been budget director, that's why we've made that change. I don't know
Isn't
how
that
long
like
it's been
kind of
going on.
hiding the fact that you're running a deficit, an operating deficit?
Hide an operating deficit? Why
Because
would...
your capital fund is borrowed money.
It is borrowing money. That's why we want to move away from doing that, paying for benefits out of the capital budget. It's also, it's hard to account for things properly, and so it's a lot more straightforward if we can put it on the operating budget as well. But we think it's a better financial practice to move as much of the operating budget as we
So
can
what's the
afford
goal
to do.
for that to happen?
So the intent is that as we hire, we will try and hire more on the operating side. Obviously, you know, we're challenged on the operating budget too, so it's getting that balance right. So as we hire, we will intend to hire on the operating budget rather than the capital budget, and then eventually maybe we'll move it kind of one department at a time, move them to the operating budget rather than fund them on the capital budget. But it's really as resources
So you're
allow.
saying that other departments have this practice of using capital money for operating expenses?
There are about three in the kind of the GO, the general operating capital budget. There are about 3 departments that have capital funded positions: the Department of Public Property, our Office of Innovation and Technology, and Parks and Recreation. I think those are the only 3 departments, I may be missing one, that have capital funded positions. And eventually we'd like to move those all to the operating budget.
How much of their budgets are reflected that way? What percentage?
I don't
Can you
have
Can you
I can
submit
get that back to you. I
And
can tell you.
Are
So
they,
it's
are
in the
those
capital
3,
budget.
any of those 3 departments part of our performance-based budgeting? Are they on the pilot or on the year to come?
Yes, all 3.
All 3 are part of the pilot
All 3 are either going to be either last year or this year.
or this year?
Yeah.
So you think we can get that done by the time we finish performance-based budgeting as part of that process?
As moving them I don't think we'll be able to get them all next year because it's just too expensive for us to do that on the operating. The challenge is that we don't have enough room on the operating budget either. So we wanted to do this as gradually as possible so it doesn't cause us too much pain on the operating budget too. So it's a kind of a gradual
Yeah,
process
but
we'll take.
my concern with, particularly in the water fund situation is, we give people rate hikes because of the water fund. We don't always necessarily get to see it. I just think it's a bad practice because we use that as an excuse for our fees and our rate hikes.
But with water, it's either water capital or water operating. It would be paid for the same. I mean, it's just you wouldn't be paying debt service on it.
It's not as transparent.
In our capital budget, we do show the payroll for each of the
Who looks
departments.
at a water fund budget?
Pardon?
Who looks at the water fund budget? It's not even part of our budget discussions half the time.
I mean, it's in all our documents and
But we never scrutinize the water fund.
okay.
I mean, that's not part of, we have
Okay.
long hearings, but that's never part of it. I
Okay.
just think there should be a goal, and if it
Okay.
can't be met when when we're requiring department to go into performance-based budget, I think there should be an explanation with a kind of
Okay,
year
and we
end
can
of when
talk.
that happens.
Yeah, we can talk through like
Okay, I
our
don't want
plan
to
to try and
monopolize
get.
this. Councilman Heenan and then Councilman Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple quick questions. One regarding the public property at 11th and Reed,
Yep.
$3.5 million for the relocation. So earlier today, we had dealt with some of the public property leases that moved that with a favorable recommendation so we can move things along. But there were leases, and Is this $3.5 million for some purchase?
So what this is allowing us, we're not sure exactly, I mean, there's Dominique from Public Property is here also. So there's been an interest expressed in our facilities at 11th and Reed. And so we wanted to have some flexibility in case these are leases that we're going to be entering into, or whether we are going to be purchasing properties for fleet and OIT. And so we're assuming the costs of this in the operating budget. We're not sure whether it would be operating or capital yet, but we wanted to make sure there was flexibility there.
Yeah, I think the increased interest at 11th and Reed is great.
Yeah.
I think that's to our benefit because
Definitely.
it's a valuable asset.
Exactly,
right?
and we will assume that the costs, whatever costs we're going to have, are going to be much less than the revenue we
But
should
I-
receive from the sale of that property.
What I'm leading into is I thought that we were going to have a turnkey lease
We-
into another facility and/or in a different lease at 12th and Market, 1234 Market with OIT. So are all of these costs like that were passed through the Public Property Committee earlier today bundled in this $3.5 million?
I think Dominique's here.
So I'm just trying to figure out, is $3.5 million on top of some of the dollars and square footage assumptions that we passed through earlier?
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Keona Sanchez. And to answer your
Your
question...
name for the record.
Dominique Casimir. To answer your question, Councilman Heenan, this is purely for the OIT and fleet management move.
Okay, so OIT fleet, and this is, and they are
For the
going to
warehouse.
move
This
out to
has nothing
Lindbergh?
to do with 1234
Okay, all right,
Market.
so OIT and fleet.
That is currently
but we're-
located at 11th and Reed.
That's currently, so it's going to cost $3.5 million to move them, or is that included in the lease, capital build-out? I thought it was a turnkey.
So for the OIT warehouse, it is a turnkey situation that we approved for the lease today. That came to an annual amount of $175,000 annually.
Right.
For the fleet management, we found a property that we would like to purchase, which is turnkey. There would be no additional improvements that would be needed to be made for that site. And so that is a not-to-exceed number for the purchase for fleet
Okay, so.
or leasing
So,
the site.
so a fleet, so we're going to purchase another building for fleet, is that correct?
Purchase or lease, yes.
Purchase and lease, so that'll come back to this body for approval, or are we approving this now?
You're just approving the appropriations now.
It's
You
just
wouldn't be
approving
approving
the
the actual,
appropriations.
yeah, exactly. You wouldn't be approving the actual purchase in
That's
this
correct.
hearing. This is not,
Okay,
this is just
so
for the
when
appropriations.
fleet and OIT are leaving 11th and Reed, all right, because they are, we're looking for a lease or a purchase, and you're making assumptions to, $3.3 million for a new building cost,
Not to exceed 3.
not to exceed?
Yes.
Yeah, and this would also include some of the kind of the move costs. I mean, there's other things kind of in this number, but it's all, yeah, it's including of that.
And that lease or purchase will come back to this body for review and purchase, or an approval, is that correct?
That is correct.
It will require public property authorization committee independent of
Yes.
any
to enter
additional
into-
cost to
right.
appropriation.
Yes.
That is
It
The
just-
chairman wants to make sure.
Thank you. Another question, thank you.
Thank you.
for Public property. The question I have is through an amendment here on land bank allocation.
I think that's in the FY18.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that.
We haven't gotten 18 yet?
Yeah, we're still dealing with closing out to 2017.
Okay, wonderful, thanks.
Then I have a whole list of questions for that. Councilman Don?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A few more questions. I'm glad you're including the fringe benefits because I want to make sure that all departments understand the real impact of hiring a person.
Yep.
And what you just said to me was it's really the average person working in the water department is a cost to the city of $91,400, not including the cost of their desk space or office overhead. Correct?
I mean, I haven't done the calculation. I believe your calculation, but yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's because when you add fringe benefits,
Right.
it is expensive.
I don't understand. I mean, because that's a big issue. I remember when we had budget hearings, for the person we hire for $50,000, the cost is $112 to the budget because of fringe and city overhead.
That's right. There's a lot of costs that go along with hiring. There's obviously pension costs, health benefits costs, but also space costs.
Yeah.
And Yes. there
All
are.
those should be applied. I'm glad you're doing it. It's good. It's good. Quick question. I see we're selling 11th and Reed. Did we have any type of architect or somebody look at the highest and best use of that property and look at the zoning before we sell it, so we at least capture the value?
I'll refer back to Dominique, who's leading that process.
Thank you again. My name is Dominique Casimir. To answer your question, Councilman Dom, yes, we're in the preliminary stages right now where we're going through all of that process as looking at to the highest and best use, looking at how we can rezone it for the highest and best use so that when the developer looks at the RFP, it's not something that they would have to do in addition to that. The value is already
That's
created.
good. I just want the city to gain the value versus not gaining it.
That is correct.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. I had a question on the Sheriff's Department. We're transferring $4.1 million to the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, it's that they ended up spending $4.1 million over.
But isn't the Sheriff's Department self-funded?
No,
It's not. So is that actual cost to the city? Because I know they raised their fees recently.
yeah, this is the kind of the overage on the general fund that we have to support.
Point of information, can you, for the purpose of Councilman Dom, this is a trend that we've generally have had to close the gap. The people from the sheriff's office will say because we didn't give them enough money in the beginning of the year. But this is a historical trend.
In the recent years, yes, we've had deficits in the sheriff department.
I don't know if someone from the sheriff's office wants to
They
add
are
to that for the purpose of the councilman.
Ben Haler, Chief Deputy Sheriff for Administration.
For the purposes of Councilman Dom, what has been kind of the trend around overtime expenditure? And is this something that you foresee as, because I know you guys are preparing your budget for next year, is this going to be something that's a trend? Are you getting less money than you request at the beginning of the year that leads to this?
Well, always. But the fact is that overtime has leveled out, part because of the increase in sworn personnel, where the overtime is concentrated. The overtime, we're in sort of an interesting situation, as we explained, I think, a year ago when this issue correctly came up. We are, I think this year, about $2 million over, but the reimbursements that come to the sheriff's office from strike duty, big events, whatever, they go to the city. So we don't get to book the revenue, we get to book the debt, and we get to stand before council and try to explain it.
So what's the difference between what they're able to ultimately bill and get reimbursed for?
I don't know. I don't know what comes in. For example, like the big events like the Pope and the DNC from a couple of years past, we don't know what they got in. And, you know, shame on us, I guess we've never asked, but we certainly provided the service that was requested.
Councilman
Can I
Dom?
ask, didn't you have an increase in the fees that were approved?
Yes, sir.
And how much was that increase in total dollars?
You're going to embarrass me. I think it's about a couple of million overall. We haven't gotten a full year in yet, but for those fees that were increased, I think it's about a couple of million, which goes directly to the city. It does not. Every quarter, that money is just sent over to the revenue department. It's yours, not ours.
Is there a way that that can get enumerated, Anna Adams, for the
Yes.
purposes of Councilman Dom and the
What we
rest
can
of
do
the
is we can
panel?
break out special events revenue for you, and then you can see how much is
With a
attributed
cost
to each
allocation
department.
kind of
Yep.
across the board? You may want to do that as part of that DNC report to Councilman Dom. right?
Okay.
Thank you. That's more.
I doubt that with the feds. All right, can we, you want to go through, if there are any other, okay,
A couple
I'm
more.
sorry, go ahead, Councilman Dom.
I have a question. I'm good with the Sheriff's Department, but thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hunt.
On the prison system. This is my favorite topic. You're asking for more money. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers. You're asking for $137,000, which is not a big deal, but what we heard in May, the testimony, that we started with 8,200 prisoners. If I recall from memory, the budget was like $248 million for the prison system without fringe benefits, but fringe made it $350, and they asked for $4 million more, so it's like $354. And we reduced it with the MacArthur grant to 6,700 prisoners, with the goal over the next year, I believe, to get to 5,800 prisoners.
I know it's a 34% reduction.
Right, 34 is from 82 to 58. Right now, we're between 66 and 6,700, I believe.
Yeah, I don't have the
Is someone
current
here from the
census
prisons who
numbers. They
can
are.
respond to that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, the commissioner's here.
Good afternoon, Chairman Quinona Sanchez and the panel. Blanche Carney, Commissioner, Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Today's population, 6,790 inmates we have in custody. For the last quarter, from August to October 2017, our average daily population was 6,838 inmates. That is an increase since our last testimony. The MacArthur efforts are still well underway. We think we've exhausted the appropriate custody level, folks, which was the community and minimum custody inmates that were considered to be low risk. Our average daily admissions during that period, 2,515, with our discharges being 2,486. Our average daily admissions for that quarter were 82, and our average daily discharges were 80. So you can see we've had a slight uptick in our population and a trend that we do not want to go. The $137,166 was for the shortfall. As you will recall, we bring on on board 4 classes per year. To contain costs, we only brought on 3. So we did not implement that last class. And we are now running up against a 12-person attrition rate per month due to transfers, retirements, and that class 50 that was not onboarded at the last quarter. So we just have currently a class of 44 in our training academy. We look to bring on another class of 50 once we reach the appropriate number of candidates, and we believe that we'll be able to reduce that cost. The overtime costs are twofold. Didn't bring in the 50 class. We do want to reduce restricted movement, allowing more inmates time out of cell. The attrition rate, 12 per month, and we also have an impact for sick leave and FMLA leave, so we have to provide coverage, and that's the request that's before you today.
I want to cut to the chase for a minute. We had 8,200 prisoners. We're down to 6,800. At 8,200, the average cost was $42,600. Now it's $52,800. And if our goal is to get to 5,800, it becomes 61,000, keeping the same budget. My concern is a 34% potential drop in the population and an increase in the costs of the prison. That's what I don't understand. There should be a $50 or $60 million reduction in your budget versus an increase. If you drop your population 34%, there should be a big reduction in the cost. You have 6 prisons. Maybe you have to close 1 and you have 5. Maybe there's less guards. Maybe the medical gets renegotiated, or the food, or the beds, whatever it is. It seems to me in any operation, when your goal is to drop 34% and we see no savings or an increase, something's not right.
I'd like to respond to that. As you're aware as well, we are depopulating our outside housing contract with the GEO contract. We currently have 62 inmates there. We originally had a contract for 400. So over the course of the last few years, we have been depopulating that contract. You're correct. We do need, in order to save and see the cost that you're requesting, you do have to close an entire facility. That will then reduce your staffing cost. However, there are still certain variables that are out of our control. I cannot turn away anyone that is committed to our custody. So the efforts still have to continue. So those are still outside variables. When we talk about the food costs, that's based on the population. When we go back to medical costs, it's not just simply $100 or so per inmate. We're treating the medical needs of the population at that time, and they can range from a healthy inmate to an inmate that really does have severe medical needs and we have to attend to. So we are looking into the recommendations, Councilman Dom, that you have provided. But if we're going to really receive and achieve that cost savings, we have to close an entire facility. And unfortunately, we have not been able to do that, but we are drawing down our outside housing contract.
Do you think it's possible to close one of the prisons?
I would love to close down one of the prisons. However, all the variables still have to work together. I am the receiving facility that works in the continuum of criminal justice. So I know there are several efforts underway, but those are still variables out of our control. If I can close a facility, I'm doing the best that I can, and you've seen that in the outside housing contracts. You put that before me, we've drawn that population down over the last 4 months from 100 and plus to 72 with a goal to get to 50. But again, it takes the whole criminal justice continuum.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
this one.
I can attest to the reduction because I inherited 3 prisons who are depopulating quickly. I guess the question is, given that the number is back up again, give me the percentage of how many of those folks are in preliminary holding, how many, given our justice reform initiatives, how many of those folks really don't need to be within your census because they could be in other pockets?
Councilwoman, I'd like to provide that information to you in detail, and I can submit those numbers to you. One of the misconceptions when we speak about pretrial is that people who are on state road can't simply make bail. There are different nuances within that pretrial population. There are folks that just maybe have a bail and that's being addressed. But when you talk about pretrial, that's inclusive of pretrial holds, people that have outside matters violations, technical violations. I'd be more than happy to send that information so you can see the breakdown. But it's about 80% if you just use that generalized term of pretrial. But I would like to provide you with the nuances of what is a true pretrial. And there are other holds with people that are in pretrial status, such as violations, bench warrants, detainers from other counties.
Right, and so the question is or as we talk about this, I think we need to be clear, our interest is we don't want to be having anybody in our prisons that is the state responsibility, right? So how many of that population should go to a state jail and let them pay for it? How many of those are part of our criminal justice reform around what is it that we need to do so that anyone who's not dangerous that doesn't need to be in that population is moving out? So maybe, would be, as we work towards the new budget year, really for you to define what those categories are so that when we talk about it, we don't generalize the 80%, but we're very specific about dangerous versus people who are bureaucratically being held or not transported to a state prison. I think that's the concern, because
And if I could speak to the diversion programs and the initiatives, that happens on the front end. And there are certain efforts, so it's twofold efforts when we talk about having the true population in custody. And the diversion, the assessment, the early bail review initiatives, we're working with our partners to make space available for different departments to come in to assess, do referrals and linkages, working with the criminal justice system to get folks out of our custody into programming post-release. In regards to inmates that are serving or have been sentenced to a state sentence, they do not languish in the PDP any longer. That was under the prior administration where we made an agreement because we were assuming that cost. Once someone is sentenced, we are coordinating with our state DOC to have them transported
so how quickly?
promptly.
So we have no state prisoners right now, and how quickly do we move them out?
On average, I can give you the specific numbers, but within 5 days. Now, we do have inmates that return to our custody for writ, and they have open Philadelphia matters, so they are housed here. Once those cases are resolved, we're sending them right back to the DOC, but I'll be more than happy to give you that breakdown.
Councilwoman Parker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my comment and a brief question, will actually be that brief. I wanted to note for the record that Philadelphia was awarded the MacArthur Grant because, not just because we are in the top 10 in terms of the largest cities in our nation, but because of the substantive work and the coordination of services and supports. I think that that committee could see that there was the potential to do in the city of Philadelphia. And so, Commissioner, what I would like for you to do is really think about how we can have some coordination with our district attorney's office with the issues that you raised, Madam Chair, relative to those who are sitting, particularly because of those technical violations, can't come up with the cash bail, and all of those other elements, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, that you know are a substantive part of criminal justice reform. And I wanted to just state for the record, and you know, part of my challenge, thank you for the yeoman's job, because someone looked at the work that we were doing in the city of Philadelphia and said that we need to make an investment here because we can do and be a model for true criminal justice reform. I hope we just take advantage of the new leadership that we have coming into the district attorney's office and work in a coordinated manner in order to realize it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, if we have any other questions, I'm going to ask our budget director to read her testimony for 958, which, so we're closing out 2017 outside of the few questions Councilman Dahm has, and we're moving into 2018 mid-year transfers.
That's right. Do you want me to read my whole testimony, Councilwoman?
You may just want to highlight some of the big highlights, because I know the councilman was going to jump quickly on some questions that I also had, so I don't know if you quickly.
And I just want to also make it clear that this that it's been amended. There are a couple of changes to and so I just want to make sure.
So why don't you speak to the amendment in particular?
So there are two amendments to the Office of Planning and Development. One is for $500,000 towards the land bank, and the other is $265,000 for the Division of Development Services within the Office of Planning and Development. I can give you some other highlights of the FY18 ordinance. We had it includes the FOP, the arbitration award, and so it's considerable changes related to that. So moving $20 million from our line that we'd set aside in the Civil Service Commission, and you can see that $27 million is going to the police department and the DA to fund the costs related to that arbitration award. And then I think that's kind of the most significant change. There are other sort of smaller changes, mostly kind of moving money between classes. I would like to say on the record that I respectfully request that you report this bill out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and I further request that the rules of council be suspended so as to permit first reading at the next session of council. And again, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Is there anyone here from planning to talk about this, the amendments, and particularly
I'm not
the
sure
land bank?
they are here today, but I can do my best myself to answer some of them, or we can also follow up with you.
Well, can I, for the record, say I'm very disappointed considering how contentious this line item is
I understand.
around the land bank?
Yes, I understand.
So, you know, we've been talking about mixed income housing and everything else, and in the discussions, regardless of where you are on the issue of our ability to ramp up the land bank and the land bank activities always comes to bear. And I think the administration reducing the amount and talking about capacity to acquire properties and utilizing the tool is quite concerning, because we have every single day properties going up for sheriff's sale because we don't have capacity. So some of the questions that I have on the record is, you know, we finally have a land bank director, but we are now 30 days from being here for 2 years, and we've acquired a handful of properties. So those of us who are district council people with a lot of land, a lot of lists, a lot of due diligence are extremely concerned, frustrated about our inability to ramp this up.
I understand. I can get back to you with kind of the plan for how this 500,000 will be used, if that would be helpful, but I don't.
The fact that we should be doing, you know, and in our strategic plan, we articulate what I always call aspirational goals, and I always get concerned because we like to put together plans that are very flowery and with aspirational goals. But at the rate we're going, and I've used this before, it'll be 2070 before I can acquire the 4,300 lots that I have in my district. I don't plan to be here in 2070, but I like my district to be better off in the next 2 years around acquisition of this property. And so we have this growing tension between internal capacity to do things and external capacity to work with even our vendors to help us acquire this. But when we can't move these properties, and every single day I got people frustrated at me that those properties are going up for sheriff's sale, people who've taken care of property 10, 15 years, because we can't activate this, it's quite challenging. So we not only expect, and it has to be on the record, we may have to have hearings about this. We need, Councilwoman. Well, I mean, the thing about it is what comes first. If we don't give them the funding, they don't do anything. And if we give them the funding, they say they don't have the capacity to acquire. So I'm not sure where we go from there. Councilman Johnson, did you have something to add to that?
No, I just want to be quite frank that, you know, with all due respect, the administration, including the mayor, he campaigned on addressing the issue of affordable housing here in the city of Philadelphia. And we do have a pretty document, and so, I mean, the reality is we need to see a budget that reflects assisting us in moving forward the properties that we put inside the land bank so we can really address the issue of affordable and workforce housing throughout the city of Philadelphia.
Councilman Heenan first, and then Councilman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow off of that, we appropriated $500,000 in.
We're amending to appropriate.
We're amending.
Adding additional
but we already
$500,000.
appropriated $500,000. And we
From
spent
last year's,
that
yes, exactly. So
Right.
this is adding an additional 500,000.
allocation. And you're asking to midterm transfer for another $500,000.
So the mid-year transfer just adds an additional $500,000.
Right, so that would be $1 million in
Yes.
FY '17.
18.
Or 18, I'm sorry. And we, you know, Councilwoman just alluded to not having the capacity for acquisition. Are we going to have, so we appropriate the $500,000 for land acquisitions, are we going to be able to make those land acquisitions before FY '19 budget kicks in?
So this would be transferred to the land bank, and then the land bank staff would be, and there's a separate entity would be making those acquisitions. I can't speak on behalf of the land bank as to how they will.
No, I'm just concerned that, you know, there's not an affordable housing plan that's cohesive, that, okay, we're working in sync together with other departments, with basic system repair, like just, even though this is land acquisition, right, but it does draw attention to the Councilwoman's, you know, attempt to really focus in on affordable housing in our neighborhoods and leverage some other entities and resources that we have for affordable housing stock that we have, whether it's on a vacant lot or it's, I don't think we have an affordable housing problem. I think we have a quality of housing problem here in the city of Philadelphia, and it is the need for affordability, right, for people that can, you know, that we can, you know, put together in a master plan, you know, with either lease to purchase or, you know, some of these systems that we have in place that we're working in concert together. I'm not sure that we allocate or appropriate $500,000 that's happening. I mean, so I'm just drawing, you know, a little skepticism. You know, I trust administrative prerogative and administrative requests, but, you know, I just want to, you know, question, all right, what are we doing? Do we not have the technical support? And in FY '19, are you going to be asking for $1 million?
Yeah, we're still going through the budget process. We just put out the call, so we haven't made any determinations about what we're proposing in the 19 budget yet.
Could you provide to the chair the first 500, you know, that we spent down in acquisitions? How many properties? Where? where they were by council districts and, with the intent of interest, right,
Yes.
expressive interest for the other $500,000 that's in front of us here today.
Yes.
Right, because I want to make sure that, it's not just going to sit and that we don't use it for operational, that we're actually making land acquisitions and we have the technical support to do so
Yes.
in a timely fashion.
Yep, we can do that.
All right, because I don't want to be in a situation where we're like the capital budget where we have, carryovers, all right, when we're really kind of, really trying to be
Okay.
program budgeting and, being, a little prudent in our efficiencies and spending.
Yeah. Yes,
And
sir.
I just, before I call on Councilman Dom or Councilwoman Blackwell, the reason we need to put the money on the table is because the administration decided to do a memorandum of understanding with the Revenue Department. So we give the land bank money so that the land bank can write the Revenue Department money. And so that to be clear, we're playing from one department is writing a check to another department, and notwithstanding that, cost that it adds to the part of acquisition is just the capacity to acquire. It shouldn't cost us, it shouldn't take this long for the acquisition. I think we've only done, 30 or so acquisitions since the land bank went into effect, so it's quite challenging. Councilman Dom and then Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This question on the land bank, I've been hearing about the land bank for a few years now, and it doesn't sound like it's been really successful. True or false?
I don't think I have I think it depends on your perspective on a variety of things.
But I just heard Councilwoman Sanchez said 30 properties have been acquired.
30.
And that's not, how many properties are the potential to be acquired?
I think the land bank has a strategic plan with goals set in that strategic plan, but I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Is there a way to expedite this? Because I remember seeing a report by eConsult about vacant properties in Philadelphia. It cost us $20 million to maintain them. So at a time where we're going to need money for the schools, maybe we should be selling those properties, collecting taxes, and turning that negative into a positive. If you're the city of Philadelphia, you have all this vacant properties, we're not doing a good job in managing our inventory.
I understand.
So, I'd like to be part of this fix and figure out how to unload or get rid of these properties and get them to the hands of people who will take care of them and pay us taxes. So I don't know what that would mean, Chairwoman Sanchez, but we need to do this because otherwise we're going to be here next year.
I think it's important to know that many of these properties, there's an inventory of about 40,000 of these vacant properties throughout the city. The vast majority of what we're asking that's in the pipeline, if you ask the district council people, there are people who have been taking care of this property because that $20 million would be much higher had some of these people not been responsible in taking care, particularly for me, a priority is these side lots where, I have 1,000 people on a list who've been taking care of a property. And now because the markets are changing through sheriff's sale, these properties are being picked up. And I think we've been irresponsible in not facilitating the acquisition for people who have skin in the game, sweat equity in the game in terms of acquiring it, to turn them into our tax rolls. The fact of the matter is we're losing out both ways, but I think the people who are losing out the most are responsible neighbors who've had to become stewards of blighted property that we've been irresponsible, and us not giving them the potential to acquire them so that they can become tax-paying. Councilwoman Blackwell?
Thank you. Let me agree with all the comments that the chair has made with regard to this issue of low-income housing and people being low-income who have an opportunity to stay in their neighborhoods, not be gentrified. I had a woman just call me today from Mantua who talked to me about taking care of these properties next door lots for more than 20 years and who wants now to own them. And what she says is true. We are very happy to support all of the high-end people who can build and who can charge any price they want, but it's the low-income people, the everyday neighbors who elect us and who send us here to try to protect them. So this is a really important issue. And certainly, we look forward to supporting her decision on which way we go for funding when it comes to low-income housing and neighbors who live in our residences. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Blackwell. Councilwoman Parker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just know when it comes to this issue of the land bank, and, I tell Councilman Johnson, members Blackwell, Sanchez, and Councilman Clark that, they have problems that I would love to have in the 9th Councilmatic District because we don't have those large swaths of land available for development. But I need to state for the record that when you think of neighborhoods that are middle neighborhoods for the benefit of the public, again, those that are not wealthy, right, but they have a healthy mix of those who are working and some struggling that would be considered low income, but they have those, who make sort of a nickel above the income eligibility guidelines, right, and are considered to be working class. This land bank is also a tool for those communities too. So as you sort of think about the comments you've heard on the record to take back to the administration, and we talk about the acquisition process, streamlining it, making it more efficient, we have to also talk about using it as a tool for communities where they may be 1 or 2 homes on a block that have been foreclosed on, but we need to gain acquisition to them so someone doesn't come in, for example, what we have been experiencing in the 9th, and demolish a stone or brick property that helps the character and the historic nature of the community, and then they come and develop, Councilman Johnson, for the new, sexy 4-story, all vinyl siding property. So for the middle neighborhoods, Councilman O'Neill has, Councilman Heenan, myself, along with Councilman Jones. I just needed to note that for the record.
Thank you. Any other questions on Bill 170958, which is mid-year transfers? I guess I just wanted an update. There is an additional, we did a transfer last year. There's an additional $500,000 to the Office of Community and Economic Opportunity. Is that for the Hub of Hope?
That's right. Yes.
That site is already open, right?
And I think there are representatives from Eva Gladstein is here. She can talk in more detail about that.
Because we did in the closeout, didn't we do some additional?
I think she can talk more. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Haven't visited yet. I hear it looks good, so. This is stuff you like.
Good afternoon, Eva Gladstein, Deputy Managing Director, Health and Human Services. The site is not open yet.
Okay.
We expect a soft opening in the beginning of January with a more formal opening at the end of the month.
And how many folks will this center be able to serve?
We're anticipating several hundred a day. So.
Okay. And so this is to open it up. Are we going to be seeing a bigger allocation later for operating purposes?
This is actually for operating,
Oh, this is the operating
for
component.
a half a year of operating expenses. It's not the full cost, but it's what our gap is in for fiscal year 18.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
January soft opening.
I've seen it. I'll be there.
You've been there for the tour, right?
Okay. Any other questions on any of the, you did the real estate? Nothing else? Councilman Dom, I shouldn't have asked. Okay, Councilman Dom.
I just want to reiterate that something that really is in my head, and that is when we're looking at a $1 billion deficit for the schools over the next 5 years, of which probably $800 million will fall on us, which is $160 million a year. We really need to look at if the prison system, by the way, increased their population by 18%, they'd be in front of us asking for 18% or 20% more funds. And the fact of the matter is that 8,200 prisoners down now to 6,700. That's an 18% drop. When you look at their budget, including fringe, $354 million, 18% is $63 million. And if it goes down to 5,800, it's 120 something, 120 million. What I'm suggesting is, as the administration, there should be 50 million there we can save. That's got to be a layup. Can't be that hard. And we're going to need the money. So that's going to be an area I'm going to say right now that I'm going to personally focus on, because there's money there. There's no one can tell me when you drop a population 34%, you can't save money. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
One last question. The $2.5 million for outside counseling fees in the managing director's office, is there a reason why it's in the managing director's office and not the city solicitor's?
It funds it's for the outside legal counsel that comes out of the legal services in the managing director's office. And it's the change, the First Judicial District adjusted the fees, and this is to respond to those adjusted fees.
So
And
this money was fundraised independently, or is general operating money?
It's general operating money to pay for additional costs related to the fees, but Ben Linick.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Benjamin Lerner. I'm the Deputy Managing Director for Criminal Justice, and I've been the administration's point person in this 15-month effort, successful effort to raise appointed counsel fees for the first time in about 25 years. The increase, which went into effect by court order on January 1st of this year, called for a 2-year phase-in of increases which will probably total between $4.5 and $5 million annually, eventually. About half of that money was needed for the first fiscal year. We are optimistic that legislation, which we're told is going to be introduced in Harrisburg as early as next week, will provide into the future a substantial portion of that money from a new revenue source. But none of that additional money was going to be available in the first fiscal year, or at least most of the first fiscal year of the new counsel fee system, which is the reason for this request.
So it's mostly public defender and other folks?
This is not public defender. This is a good...
Conflict.
This is conflict counsel in both criminal court and family court.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Judge Lerner. Seeing no other questions, we will go into the appropriations public meeting. The chair will call on Councilman Heenan for a motion on 170957.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Bill number 170957 be reported out of committee with a favorable recommendation as the suspension, with the rule suspension to be heard at our next council session.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, Bill 170957 will be moved out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and rule suspension. Can I get a motion on the amendment to Bill 170958?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that an amendment to Bill number 170958 be adopted.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? Seeing none, the amendment is authorized. Let me have a motion with the amended bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Bill number 170958, as amended, be reported out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and suspension of the rules and to be heard at our next council session.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, Bill 170958, as amended, will be moved out of this committee with a favorable recommendation with rule suspension to allow first hearing at our next public session. This concludes the appropriations hearing. Thank you, and meeting. Thank you very much to our budget director and all the personnel here.
Thanks.